So I want to talk to you today about integers. And specifically, when we talk about integers right now, we're going to be talking about adding them and subtracting. Okay, so there's lots of different ways to think about adding and subtracting integers. First of all, what do we mean by integers? We're talking about positive and we're talking about negative whole numbers. So, for example, an integer might be 9, but an integer is not going to be 9.2. And that's because that is not a whole number. But it's also negative whole number, so like negative 3 would work because 3 is a whole number, so negative 3 would work. But negative 3.5, not an integer. So now that we're all clear on that, I want to look specifically about how to add and subtract them. So lots of ways to think about it. I want to first just look at adding. So if I'm going to add integers together, a lot of people have used a number line before. I like to think about them almost as like number chips. So for example, if I have two positives, can you see that that's blue? This is blue. If I have two positives and I add that, let's say, to 3 more, then that's a total of 5 positives, right? So I have 5 total positives. But the same could be said about negative. I'm combining how many negatives I have. So if I have, for example, 3 negatives, and maybe I add that to 2 more negatives, let's say 3 more negatives, then I have 3 negatives and 3 negatives, so I have 6 negatives. Where it's kind of difficult is if I add something like 2 positives, and then I add 3 negatives. So basically, we're talking about the signs being different from one another. And when the signs are different from one another, I like to think about it like this. If I have 2 negatives and 2 positives, then I have nothing. Because these positives and these negatives cancel each other out, right? So let's say, for example, you did well on something, right? So you went up 1 level. But then if you add a negative to that, then you actually have to come back. So you come back to the same point. So it's almost like thinking about it, right, as these two canceling each other out. So this one and this one cancel each other out. And so that happens here. So I only end up with 1 negative left over. So when you have opposite signs, you can think, well, in my mind, I think, who's winning? Well, there's more negatives than there are positives. How many more? 1 more. So there's 1 more negative. So let's try that with a couple more where they're adding but they're opposite. So let's look at this. So right now I have 4 negatives and I'm adding that to 6 positive. So see how my signs are opposite? Well, I have the same number as negatives and positives here, but then I have 2 additional positives, so my answer is positive 2.